Alright. It's been a while. Been a while since I did one of these. Let's get some strategy. Let's get them pages read. Yeah, this is where I was at, somewhere around here. Okay. He never really put the effort into developing a coherent philosophy. Without the direct engagement of Rustin and Levison, his first book, Stride Toward Freedom, would not have been published. Garrow described the chapter on nonviolence as an embarrassment. Here too, King's contributions indicated a tendency to borrow liberally from others. The key chapter on pilgrimage to nonviolence was in part a poorly organized and at times erroneous hodgepodge of contributions from a number of King's editorial advisors. Despite the shortcomings of the book, King was on his way to becoming an iconic figure, and Rustin understood better than most its value to the civil rights movement. Any comparison with Gandhi was suggestive but potentially misleading. King was only in his mid-20s and had neither prepared for nor saw a political role. He was at times a muddled thinker, and it later transpired somewhat reckless in his private life. And yet, for all his flaws and inexperience, there was no denying his courage, commitment, and grasp of Southern black culture. His eloquence was special, almost poetic, drawing on the familiar cadences and rhythms of black preachers, but also the classical tropes of American democracy and Western philosophy. The evident risk he was running in the face of regular death threats, real violence, and occasional spells in prison demonstrated that he was a man who suffered for his cause. He soon became a media star and so came to personify the black movement as its most visible face and most compelling voice. He had the quality described by Weber as charisma. As he reflected on the Montgomery campaign, Russell noted the strategic benefits of a bus boycott. It had a clear purpose, economic impact, and was susceptible to direct action. Unlike other targets such as immigrant education, there was no administrative machinery and legal maneuvering to get in the way. The action required a daily rededication to the struggle and so raised community solidarity and pride-making. Humble folk, noble, and turning fear into courage. Notably, it had depended upon the most stable social institution in Negro culture, the church. In early 1957, Rustin masterminded the formation of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Each word was significant. Southern meant not national. Christian reflected the special role of the church in the South for whites as well as blacks, and incidentally undermined claims that the movement was communist. Leadership Conference ensured a mass membership organization. The advantage of this formulation was to avoid a fight with the NAACP, a national organization which considered itself best able to speak for blacks. The NAACP's director, Roy Wilkins, was wary of King as a young upstart. King made little secret of his concern that based in the North, Wilkins was too preoccupied with mounting legal challenges to the Jim Crow laws and had done little to challenge them directly. Nonetheless, he did not want to foment disunity in the movement. The serious advantage of the SCLC was that it provided institutional support to King as the leader, capable of giving meaning to the struggle and describing the strategy in terms that made sense to those who had to follow it. Wolford later recalled how Rustin seemed ever present with advice and sometimes acted as if King were a precious puppet whose symbolic actions were defined by a Gandhian high command. Rustin understood that King was no puppet and had special leadership qualities. The real problem, as he acknowledged, was that the church was a natural autocracy without serious bureaucratic procedures. Ministers organized politically in the same way that they organized their congregations. This suited King, but it soon led to complaints. One of King's most severe critics was Ella Baker, an effective organizer who ran the SCLC. She became discouraged by the developing cult of personality, reflecting the urge to find a savior which held backed the emergence of a democratic mass movement. Without a mass base, there was no secure financial stream, and much of King's time was spent touring to raise funds. Fairclough argues that the decision against creating a national mass membership organization turned out to be a serious and eventually crippling handicap. Even with a large organization, there would have been problems when it came to major campaigns of nonviolent direct action. There were a limited number of volunteers, perhaps no more than 5% of a given population. From those with jobs or responsibilities to their families, it was unrealistic to expect major commitment. The real difference when it came to the surge of militancy that marked the early 1960s was that substantial numbers of students, black and white, developed a taste for direct action. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, formed with SCLC's help in 1960, began to make their mark by reviving the sort of action pioneered by James Farmer and his colleagues in 1942, starting with 4 students sitting in at Woolworth lunch counter in Greensboro in 1961. At the time, this was presented as a spontaneous expression of anger that somehow sparked a movement, a representation that dried up like a raisin in the sun as it became apparent that the students had been activists in the youth wing of the NAACP, were drawing on the experience of sit-ins over the previous 2 years and had planned the activity carefully. The movement spread through a network of churches and campuses. In May, the first Freedom Rides intended to desegregate bus terminals across the south of Washington. The tactic fitted nationally, which the direct action flag.